What you're about to discover represents one of history's most deliberate campaigns of psychological pressure. For 76 days, they didn't merely hold Marie Antoinette captive. They methodically stripped away her humanity, layer by layer. And it began with an 8-year-old child. Forget what you've been told about her final day. What came before was something infinitely more complex. They identified her single point of vulnerability and weaponized it with a calculation that still stains the historical record. This is the account of Prisoner 280. And I'm going to reveal precisely what they subjected her to. The night everything changed. July 3rd, 1793, deep in the night hours, the Temple prison in Paris. The sound of boots reverberates through stone passageways. Deliberate, heavy, drawing nearer. Marie Antoinette sleeps beside her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles. Her hand lies against his chest. She hasn't allowed him beyond her sight since they took his father 6 months earlier. The door crashes inward. 6 guards surge into the room clutching a document, an official decree. They've arrived for the boy. The scene that unfolds will resonate through those prison walls for a full hour. A woman who once wore a crown becomes something elemental. A mother battling for her child with every fragment of strength remaining in her body. She positions herself against the doorway. She protests until her voice breaks. She pleads with them to take her instead. But here's what amplifies this moment's significance. This isn't arbitrary action. This isn't disorder. This is premeditated because the revolutionaries have discovered something essential. They cannot reach Marie Antoinette through physical hardship, deprivation, or degradation, but they can affect her through her own maternal love. And they're preparing to use her son to break her in ways that will change everything. Stay with me, because what I'm about to expose becomes exponentially more complex. Who was she really? Before we confront the challenges ahead, you need to comprehend who Marie Antoinette actually was. Because the woman they imprisoned in 1793 bore no resemblance to the distorted image the revolutionaries manufactured. She entered this world as Maria Antonia in Vienna 1755, an Austrian archduchess, and the youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa. At 14 years old, she was married to the future King Louis XVI of France. This wasn't romance, this was international politics. Austria and France required an alliance, and she became the currency. The French court was unwelcoming from day one. She was Austrian, which designated her as the outsider. She was young, uncertain, and failed to grasp French customs. The courtiers ridiculed her accent, her wardrobe, her every gesture. Even her own husband kept his distance for years. Their marriage wasn't consummated until 7 years had passed, a situation that transformed into public discussion across Europe. So she did what any isolated young woman might do. She retreated into pleasure. Extravagant hairstyles, costly gowns, celebrations at her private estate, the Petit Trianon. The French populace, struggling and desperate, witnessed these indulgences and labeled her Madame Deficit. Did she genuinely declare, "Let them eat cake," when informed the people possessed no bread? No, that's fabrication, but it was irrelevant. The damage was complete. By the time the revolution ignited in 1789, Marie Antoinette had become France's most expedient scapegoat. She wasn't a villain, she was a foreigner, a woman and a queen. 3 attributes that rendered her the ideal target. And when the monarchy collapsed, the revolutionaries required someone to blame for centuries of royal extravagance. They selected her. But here's the essential detail. By 1793, Marie Antoinette wasn't the frivolous socialite anymore. She was a mother of 4 who'd watched her eldest son pass away from tuberculosis at age 7. She'd witnessed her husband taken from her. She'd spent months confined in the Temple prison with her surviving children, understanding any day might be their last. She'd already surrendered everything, her crown, her liberty, her husband, her nation. The revolutionaries were preparing to demonstrate that she could still lose more. Inside the Temple prison. Let me construct for you a vision of the Temple prison, because this location was designed to break people long before anything else occurred. It was a medieval fortress in Paris, originally constructed by the Knights Templar. Shadowy, humid, oppressive, After King Louis XVI was taken in January 1793, Marie Antoinette and her two surviving children, 14-year-old Marie-Thérèse and 8-year-old Louis Charles, were sealed in a tower, monitored day and night. Initially, they remained together. Marie Antoinette attempted to preserve some appearance of ordinary life for her children. She instructed them in lessons, she prayed with them. She embraced them closely at night when the noises of revolutionary crowds resonated through the streets beyond. But the guards were observing, perpetually observing, documenting notes, transmitting reports to the Committee of Public Safety, the revolutionary government that now dominated France, and they perceived something. Marie Antoinette could withstand anything except concerns about her children, so they commenced experimenting with psychological pressure. First, they limited access to the children's chambers, compelling Marie Antoinette to request permission to see her own son and daughter. Then, they positioned additional guards within their quarters, men who sat in corners staring, recording everything, every dialogue, every instant of tenderness, every tear. The children weren't permitted to speak German, their mother's native tongue. They had to employ French exclusively, which meant even their intimate family moments were surveilled and regulated by the state. Marie Antoinette began to deteriorate. Her hair, which had been light brown, began transforming white from strain, a condition called Marie Antoinette syndrome, which is actually a genuine medical phenomenon. She stopped eating. She developed health issues that she tried frantically to conceal from the guards. But she persisted because she still possessed her children. The revolutionaries understood they needed to remove that from her. July 3rd, 1793, the date that would determine Marie Antoinette's ultimate challenge. Let me guide you through what transpired that night, because the primary sources, the actual testimony of people who were present, are absolutely heartbreaking. It's approximately 10 p.m. Marie Antoinette has just settled 8-year-old Louis Charles into bed. He's sleeping in the same chamber. She hasn't permitted him from her sight since his father's departure. Her daughter, Marie-Thérèse, and her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, occupy adjacent rooms. Then they detected boots. Multiple men ascending the tower stairs. The door opens forcefully. 6 municipal guards led by a man carrying an official decree from the Committee of Public Safety. They've arrived to remove Louis Charles. He's to be re-educated by the Republic, separated from his mother's influence. Marie-Thérèse later documented this moment in her memoir. She described how her mother transformed from composed to desperate in an instant. Marie Antoinette positioned herself between the guards and her sleeping son. She gathered Louis Charles and held him closely as he awakened crying, bewildered, and then she began protesting loudly. Not the refined objections of a former queen.
Raw, emotional protest. You will not take him.
He is just a child. The guards attempted to negotiate with her. The order originated from the highest authority. She possessed no option, she didn't accept this. For 1 full hour, 60 minutes, she physically obstructed the doorway, holding her son, refusing to permit them passage. The guards gave her ultimatums. They pressured her. They mentioned consequences if she didn't comply. Marie Antoinette continued resisting. Finally, Madame Elizabeth implored her sister-in-law to reconsider. The boy was sobbing, terrified. Marie-Thérèse was extremely distressed, and the situation was escalating. Marie Antoinette's resistance finally broke. She kissed Louis Charles one final time. She whispered something in his ear, we'll never discover what. And then she observed as 6 men escorted her 8-year-old son down the tower stairs, his cries reverberating until they dissolved into silence. She remained on the floor for hours, unable to move. But here's where it becomes truly calculated. The revolutionaries didn't simply take her son. They delivered him to a man named Antoine Simon, a radical cobbler specifically chosen to re-educate the boy, and Simon's methods were severe. Louis Charles was confined to a dark room. He was required to wear a red revolutionary cap and sing anti-monarchist songs. He was taught to speak against his mother, to repeat accusations of treason and conspiracy. When he refused, he faced harsh discipline and isolation until the boy's spirit broke. Within weeks, Louis Charles was repeating everything they instructed him to say, including accusations so serious that they would be used against his mother later. Marie Antoinette didn't know the details, but she knew her son was suffering, and there was nothing she could do to help him. That's when they transferred her to the Conciergerie. On August 1st, 1793, less than a month after they took her son, guards arrived at Marie Antoinette's room in the Temple prison at 2:00 a.m. No explanation, no warning, just an order: you're being transferred. They separated her from her daughter and sister-in-law. She begged to say goodbye. They refused. They escorted her down the tower stairs, placed her in a carriage, and drove her through the dark Paris streets to a place called the Conciergerie. If you know anything about the French Revolution, you recognize this name. The Conciergerie was called the antechamber to what came next. It's where prisoners went in their final days. Marie Antoinette wasn't just being moved. She was being prepared for what lay ahead. But the revolutionaries wanted to make those final days as psychologically challenging as possible. She was assigned prisoner number 280. Not the former queen, not even her name, just a number. Her cell was minuscule, approximately 12 feet by 8 feet. The walls were damp stone covered in mold. There was a thin straw mattress, a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a chamber pot.
A single candle for light.
No windows, just the darkness of the medieval dungeon. And here's the truly calculated part. They gave her a privacy screen. A folding screen so she could change clothes or use the facilities in privacy. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. The privacy screen was meaningless because inside that cell at all times were 2 armed guards. They sat in the corner and watched her every single moment. When she ate, when she slept, when she changed her clothes behind that ineffective screen, when she used the facilities, when she prayed, when she cried. Constant, unblinking surveillance. This wasn't about security. She was a middle-aged woman in failing health, locked in a dungeon. This was psychological pressure designed to strip away her last shred of dignity and privacy. Historical accounts describe how Marie Antoinette tried to maintain her composure. She would sit for hours staring at the wall, her face completely blank. The guards reported that she barely spoke, barely moved, barely ate. But at night, when she thought they couldn't see in the candlelight, they heard her crying, whispering her son's name, Louis Charles, over and over. Her health continued declining. She had medical issues that caused her embarrassment in front of guards who showed no compassion. Her hair, now completely white, started falling out in clumps. She was 37 years old. She looked 60. And then came the trial. The trial, October 14th, 1793. 8 a.m. Marie Antoinette was brought from her cell to the Revolutionary Tribunal. This wasn't a fair trial, it was theatre. The verdict was already determined, but the revolutionaries needed a spectacle, something to justify their actions to the public and to history. The courtroom was packed. Revolutionary officials, journalists, citizens eager to witness the former queen publicly questioned. The prosecutor, a man named Antoine Fouquier-Tinville, prepared to present charges of treason, conspiracy, and financial mismanagement. Marie Antoinette sat in the defendant's chair, pale, gaunt, dressed in widow's black. For 2 days they presented accusations against her, that she conspired with Austria, that she squandered France's treasury, that she planned counter-revolutionary activities. She responded to each charge with startling composure and intelligence. She refuted false claims. She admitted to mistakes without apologizing excessively. She refused to be diminished. So Fouquier-Tinville introduced his final, most devastating evidence. He called a witness, Jacques Hébert, a radical journalist, and Hébert repeated accusations allegedly made by Marie Antoinette's 8-year-old son, Louis Charles. The boy, under coaching from his handlers, had made claims about inappropriate conduct by his mother. Let that sink in for a moment. They accused her of terrible things involving her own child, using testimony coerced from an 8-year-old boy in a public courtroom in front of hundreds of people. The room went silent. Even many in the crowd seemed stunned by the nature of the accusation. Marie Antoinette had remained stoic through every insult, every lie, every charge. But this shattered her composure. She stood up, her voice, which had been calm, cracked with raw emotion.
I appeal to all the mothers present in this room, she said, her eyes intense.
Is there among you a single one who would not be horrified by such an accusation? She didn't address the judges. She spoke directly to the women in the crowd, mothers, daughters, sisters. For the first time in the trial, she wasn't defending herself as a queen. She was speaking as a mother whose child had been used against her. Nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge made against a mother, she continued. I appeal to all mothers who are listening to me. The courtroom erupted. Some women in the crowd who had come expecting to witness justice were moved to tears. Even some of the revolutionary officials shifted uncomfortably. It was too much, too calculated. But Fouquier-Tinville didn't pause. He continued through the rest of the trial. At 4:00 a.m. on October 16th, after a trial lasting less than 2 days with limited real evidence, Marie Antoinette was found guilty of high treason and crimes against the state. The sentence was decided. Her fate was scheduled for later that same day. She was given a few hours in her cell to prepare. Back in her cell, with dawn approaching and only hours remaining, Marie Antoinette was finally given a pen, paper, and ink. She didn't write a political statement. She didn't express anger about the revolution. She didn't plead for mercy. She wrote a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elisabeth, who was still imprisoned in the temple with Marie Antoinette's daughter. The letter is one of the most heartbreaking documents in history. Let me share portions of it with you. It is to you, sister, that I write for the last time. I have just been condemned, not to a shameful outcome that is only for criminals, but to rejoin your brother.
Innocent like him, I hope to show the same firmness in my last moments.
I am calm as one is when one's conscience reproaches one with nothing.
I deeply regret having to leave my poor children.
You know that I lived only for them and for you, my good and tender sister. She went on to forgive those who opposed her, to ask pardon for any wrongs she had committed, and to beg her sister-in-law to care for her children. May my son never forget his father's last words, which I expressly repeat to him. Let him never seek to avenge us. She poured every ounce of her remaining love onto that page, her final thoughts as a mother, as a sister, as a human being facing the end. The letter filled 4 pages. She signed it simply, Marie Antoinette. Then she handed it to a guard. Here's the devastating truth. The letter was never delivered. Her jailers intercepted it, and it vanished into a revolutionary archive. Madame Elisabeth never read it. Neither did her daughter. The letter wasn't discovered until decades later, long after everyone Marie Antoinette loved was gone. Her final words to her family died in silence. October 16, 1793, 11 a.m. The executioner's assistant entered Marie Antoinette's cell and ordered her to prepare. Every step was designed to strip away the final remnants of her identity. First, the dress. She was wearing a simple black morning gown she'd worn since her husband's passing. The guard ordered her to change into a plain white chemise, the uniform of the condemned. She asked to change in private. The guard refused. She had to change in front of the men who'd been watching her for months. Second, the hair. Her hair, now completely white and brittle, was cut short with shears.
No ceremony, no care, just the removal of one of her last physical dignities.
Third, the binding. Her hands were tied behind her back with coarse rope, quite tightly. She mentioned quietly, "You did not bind my husband's hands like this." The guard ignored her. At 11:06 a.m., she was led out of the Conciergerie into bright daylight. She'd been in that dark cell for 76 days. The sunlight was harsh on her eyes. She expected a closed carriage, the small consideration her husband had been granted. Instead, there was a rough, open wooden cart, kind used for common transport. She was required to sit in the cart on a plank, hands bound, exposed to the entirety of Paris. As the cart moved forward through the streets, thousands of people lined the route, shouting, expressing their anger, reacting intensely. One man sat at a window, sketching quickly. Jacques Louis David, the revolutionary artist who'd supported her prosecution. His drawing survives. It shows a thin, hollow-eyed woman sitting rigidly upright, her face a mask of determined dignity as the world expressed its judgment. The journey to the Place de la Révolution took over an hour of public exposure designed to diminish whatever remained of her spirit. It didn't work. At 12:15 p.m., the cart stopped at the platform. The crowd responded loudly. Marie Antoinette climbed the steps without assistance, her legs trembling but her head held high. And then in the final moment of her life, something extraordinary happened. As she walked toward her final position, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. She stopped, turned to him, and spoke her last words. "Pardon me, sir."
I did not mean to do it.
An apology to the man overseeing her final moments. A remarkable act of courtesy, the final reflex of a life lived under royal protocol. But it was more than that. It was a choice. In the face of absolute degradation, she chose grace. Moments later, her life ended. What they couldn't take. The French Revolution wanted to destroy Marie Antoinette, the symbol, the Austrian woman, the wasteful queen, the embodiment of royal excess. They subjected her to unimaginable psychological pressure. They weaponized her own child against her. They stripped her of every dignity, every comfort, every shred of privacy. And in the end, they failed to destroy who she truly was. Because in their obsession with breaking the queen, they accidentally revealed the human being underneath.
A mother who fought desperately for her children.
A woman who faced terrible accusations with courage. A person who, even in her final moments, held on to her humanity. They wanted her remembered as the widow Capet, a traitor who deserved her fate. Instead, history remembers Marie Antoinette, a woman who endured 76 days of calculated psychological pressure and still found the grace to apologize to her executioner.
That's the part they couldn't take from her. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button.
We're exploring history's most complex chapters every week. And drop a comment after learning what really happened in those final 76 days. How do you see Marie Antoinette now?
Villain, victim, or something far more nuanced?